Hey, deadly listeners, welcome to the Indigipreneur Podcast, a show that helps you gain a better understanding of Indigenous entrepreneurship and answer all your related questions. I'm your host, Dean Foley, an Indigenous entrepreneur with over 5 years' experience in the field. In today's episode, we'll hear from Latarnie talk about soil to sales, challenges and opportunities to reach equity for Indigenous food rights and profits, which she spoke about at the First Nations Economic Forum.
Thanks. Hi everyone. I'm Latarnie McDonald. I'm a Wiradjuri person up from the Merriwa country, and I'm joining you from down on Dja Dja Wurrung country today. So yeah, it looks like it's been a great range of speakers. Mine's going to be short and sharp and more reliant on your questions and ideas and experiences. So I want it to be as interactive as possible and see how we go. So my presentation, I had to swap computers this morning. So I'll just be looking at a couple of notes here, and please just jot anything down for afterwards. I'll just be talking for 5 or 10 minutes and really interested in hearing experiences you've had and ideas as well. So my talk today will be on soil to sales. So it's my experience in working in the bush foods or Indigenous food area, and with some traditional owners funded to set up a self-determination business, and some challenges along the way, and also how we went about addressing those challenges. So I was a manager of the program, and I won't be really talking about the details, the who's, the how's, the what's. It'll be more like the process I sort of developed to go through. And just to give you an overview of the program that we ran, so it was sort of funded quite well. So we were able to work with a whole range of sectors, and the bush food. So we were looking at a native grass or an Indigenous grass, and that we went right from seed collecting through to cultivating and looking at sort of modernised growing techniques that would make seed harvesting more reliable. Then we're looking at new harvesting methods, seed cleaning, trials that we were setting up with food companies. And then I started looking into accreditation versus certification. So that might be an area that a few of you are experienced in or started to look at or ask questions on as well. And then what happens when you want to bring people in or universities in to do research? So they're the areas I'm going to cover today. I'd just like to see in the chat perhaps if there's anyone or any groups here who are into Indigenous or bush foods in their areas, and or people who are interested in that. If you could just use the chat as much as possible. There's a Q&A bar there, I think, as well. So type away and I'll answer or do some interaction with you as well. So the seed collecting I was doing with the Traditional Owner Corporation, we had, I guess that's a process in itself. So actually, even though you would think any traditional owner on country would be able to go and collect what seed they want or need naturally, that's not always the case, unfortunately. So I asked the council permissions to collect from roadsides because the seed wasn't really that available like in paddocks, because it's mostly farming country here. So not a lot of this native grass seed in the paddocks and that's on a lot on public land, but not so much on land where you can just go and collect your own seed. So down here, the mob I was working with had also developed their own plan that had been approved from the Department of Land and Water to set out what their rights were across the country, and seed collecting was one of those. So not saying that you have to work with council and get permissions, but it's just one of those areas where if you have to go onto land where you don't have access to, that was a tricky area to navigate, and happy to look at other ways that you guys have done that. Cultivating was really interesting. So we were setting up sort of 20-acre, 50-acre sites, and we, then the what you call native harvesting with the machines, that's pretty limited in this country because of the bumpy ground, or you're in a national parks or a roadside. So we decided to cultivate to plant seed into already cropped paddocks. So they were sort of nice and cleaned up and ready to plant seed into. So the notion there was actually using modern techniques, as the mob talked about, being a modern people needing modern techniques to develop their own business. So we went about leasing paddocks from farmers who were cropping and working with them to look at cultivating and improving cultivation methods. So that was sort of the learning experience. And then after that, the goal is to own and crop our own plants. So that worked pretty well. There was a lot of education needed, of course, with the farmers. I picked a couple who were really interested in working with local mob and not too stuck in their ways. So it was really good, actually, that the process of selecting farmers just two farmers that were pretty progressive and interested in working with us to develop new methods. But the other side of, you might be thinking, oh, that sounds pretty unusual. But what happened is that we fully had contracts in place to say, well, this traditional owner corporation owns all the methods and techniques developed. So that was really a different way of going about things. It wasn't just word of mouth and handshake. It was very much contracts developed to say any methods that are developed and used here are owned by this traditional owner corporation. So it's sort of using the white fella ways in order to create that empowerment or self-determination business. Harvesting was a bit similar. So the machinery used to grow and to sow and harvest was very different to what you'd use for wheat, of course. So, there's a lot of shopping around to find the people to work with as well as the right machinery. And then as part of that, we employed researchers to work with. And that's where that was really another big test and a really big flip to say to a university, this traditional owner corporation would like to contract your research services with this written contract, and we will own all the output. Or the traditional owner corporation would own all the output. So that took a lot for the university to come to terms with. They did just take a few months to sort through that, and it actually turned out being quite fine after all. It was just very new for them. So I'd encourage anyone to look at the contract processes to make it so your traditional owner group or your cultural group owns the information if you need to contract a research university or private people. So don't be afraid to do that, because without that, the information just keeps getting stolen, of course. So those contracts work really well. The people I worked with, that was a real education process for them on what does self-determination mean and why is it so important for mob. So I don't know whether it was luck or just a good, slower way of going about meeting up with those researchers to explain how, the trauma and past of how things, plants, animals, land, had been continuously stolen from our Indigenous peoples. So through creating that empathy and really deepening the understanding and connection with that traumatic past, it actually meant the researchers were really interested and keen to make things better and to work on this for the traditional owner group and not for themselves, which is very unusual for the research academics, because it's usually about how many papers and all about how much they can provide for themselves. So the university that I worked with was very keen to change that model, which was great. And there were also other bush food projects and social projects that were built up with that university. So that covers a bit on the research and food trials. As far as developing food products with companies, can probably mention to you that Uncle Toby's was actually very keen on looking at Indigenous food plants and how they could possibly be incorporated or create totally new products. So it's, as you're probably aware, there's a lot of interest there in how things can be used. But the catch there was, once again, maintaining ownership. So the dollars all came back to the traditional owner corporation. And that's where I was able to talk with that food company or that food processor and say, well, once again, these are all the self-determination terms and conditions we think are like really important if you want to deal with this TO corporation. And they were very understanding of that and basically were willing to put the stamp of this is this mob's food produced in this food product, like you'd see, say, an organic label or I guess a heart tick kind of label. It would come, the food product developed down the track would come with this is a traditional owner produced ingredients, and this is the mob, and this is what they've provided. And I'll go into the accreditation kind of part of it now. So way back when I was actually with the Victorian Farmers Market Association, and they created a really great model of accreditation. So I'd encourage anyone to look at that in a lot of detail, and don't be afraid to reach out to that group as well, the Vic Farmers Market Association. They set up a really good series of accreditations and they have members, and and a way of tracing and tracking and proving that a food and a product comes from a producer. And so to me, that's probably the easiest model to set up with your mob or group to create that identity and practice of saying, well, this food product is being developed, or could be any product. This product has been developed by this mob, and here's our accreditation stamp of approval that goes with those ingredients or products. So, certification, I guess I've been involved in the organic sector a lot, and certification is a much longer process and a lot more involved. And as a lot of you would know, that certification, it might be a bit down the track and on its way, but the easiest way to kind of get in and create systems where you can ensure the dollars come back to your mob, I think, is accreditation. And there's a lot of good work being done on IP, by Terry Jenke and many others, on how to make sure that IP as well as the dollars come back to community. So I guess that's where I'd like to end on. And it's pretty quiet crowd out there. No questions at the moment, but feel free to type them in. So nice and short and sharp from me. Just looking at that bush food or Indigenous food model to look at self-determination and the importance of taking time with the people that you want to work with, and walking in those two worlds so you can create that respect and back it up with the contracts to really make sure that the other people you're working with can respect your mob and how to work with you in a contract kind of way. So it's more or less using the white fella ways to affirm your own business that you're developing. So I'll leave it there, and thanks for the opportunity to present. Happy for anyone to contact me. My email address I'll provide. It's just lmcdonaldinfo@gmail.com, and happy to help out anyone along the way. Feel free to get in touch. So thanks, Dean, and have a great conference, and we'll talk again down the track.